Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior corporate leader coming to The Brand Called You for a second time from Canada, Mr. Shanil Ebrahim. Shanil, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Shanil is a partner and head of AI strategy at Deloitte, Canada. So, Shanil, my first question, how do you define an effective AI strategy in today's rapidly changing business environment?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the way I think about it is pretty simple. Um, an effective AI strategy is not about saying let's sprinkle AI across a company,
Mhm.
and that's where a lot of organizations are right now. A lot of organizations are, experimenting and buying tools and launching pilots, and that's all fine, but it doesn't automatically mean the business is changing. And you see a lot of companies struggle with this.
Mm.
So real AI strategy starts with a more basic question, in my view, which is where's the business stuck? Where are people doing repetitive work?
Mm.
Where are decisions taking too long? Where are customers waiting? Where are employees spending, hours chasing information? And you can look at this across a whole bunch of different industries, whether it's a bank that's trying to speed up loan approvals, a retailer trying to personalize the customer experience, or a hospital trying to reduce, documentation burden for a physician. But AI only matters when it connects to a real business outcome. So to me, when I think about a strong AI strategy, it should answer a few critical things. The first is, what problem are we actually trying to solve?
Mm.
And the second is, how will the work actually change?
Mm.
And the third thing is, how will we know it worked? Which means we have to think about the measurement.
Yeah.
Because if AI does not make the business faster or smarter or more efficient or more valuable to customers, then it's not a strategy. And
Mm.
I strongly believe that the companies that will win with AI will not be the ones that talk most or do most with AI.
Mm.
They'll be the ones that use it to redesign how the business actually runs.
Mm. Great response. Tell me what separates organizations that successfully scale AI from those that remain stuck in pilot mode?
Yeah, and you're getting to the heart of something that we're seeing a lot in the landscape.
Mm.
And I think the big difference is whether AI is treated as a business transformation or a technology experiment
Mhm.
is at the heart of a lot of this. The organizations stuck in pilot mode usually have their Copilot license or their Gemini license or a lot of demos or a lot of tools, a lot of excitement, but no real ownership of the outcome itself.
Mm.
And the companies that scale are much more disciplined.
Mm.
They pick a business domain that matters, whether it is a claims function in insurance or HR within the company. They redesign the work, embed AI into the workflow, and then they measure value, and then they scale to other functions or other domains.
Mm.
Amazon to me is probably one of the best examples when it comes to this.
Mhm.
They've been an AI-driven company for a very long time, but the power for them is not just that they use algorithms or great models. It's that their recommendations that you see on Amazon.com or their inventory or their pricing or their fulfillment or their customer experience, they're all connected with one another.
Mm.
And that's how AI actually powers things. And I spent a lot of time in healthcare, and it's the same thing. If you use AI to summarize a patient file, that's interesting. But if it actually helps reduce time to therapy or reduce rework or readmission and helps the nurse know, what the next best action is, that's where transformation actually happens. And
Mm.
AI scales when it changes, to me, the operating system and the culture of the business, and not when it sits, beside everyone and looks like a shiny tool.
Very interesting. Why do you believe the future belongs to hands on leaders rather than purely strategic or supervisory leaders?
Honestly, because in this AI moment, leadership cannot be about reviewing materials or decks and approving budgets at this point in time. The technology is moving so fast
Mm.
and the implications are so close to how the business actually works that it becomes quite critical. And I
Mm.
do not mean that every CEO needs to become a coder or a software engineer. That's
Yeah.
not what I mean, right? But leaders do need to use the tools, test the workflow, challenge the outputs, and understand where AI creates value or risk. Like I love the way that Satya Nadella thinks about this at Microsoft. He's actually testing a lot of the tools and building things himself,
Mm.
and not to, productionize it, but to be able to truly understand where it's
Mm.
actually headed. And whether people agree with every move or not, he has clearly made AI as a core operating priority and not a side innovation project. And
Mm.
it's because he's also tested this, and that's his mindset. And I feel this is the exact same mindset leaders need. If a leader has never used the tools and have never seen
Correct.
employees actually struggle with things,
Mm.
they will manage this from too far away. And I do find that in this AI age or this AI era, detached leadership is going to be very, very expensive for companies.
Correct. Well said. And tell me, how is agentic AI changing the traditional role of executives and senior leadership?
Yeah, agentic AI has really taken off. And I do find that, especially since middle of last year, there's been some big strides. And to me, agentic AI changes the executive role because it moves AI from insight to action. Because
Mm.
traditional AI will give you a model or a forecast or a recommendation that you end up basically using. Agentic AI can start executing pieces of the workflow, drafting, checking, routing, following up, escalating, and coordinating across systems.
Mhm.
And that means executives cannot just ask, what does the data say?
Mm.
They have to ask, what decisions are we comfortable letting the system make or initiate? Like
Mm.
I look at banking, for example. That might be, fraud alerts or credit card workflows, where in retail it might be inventory and pricing. In healthcare, it could be referral or patient support, right? And the executive team now has to define the rules of the game.
Mm.
What AI can do, what can it recommend, what needs human approval, and what should never be automated.
Mm.
And leadership becomes less about supervising people or managing people and
Mm.
more about designing a business where humans and AI can work together at the end of the day.
Mm. And yet, a follow-up question for you, Shanil, would be how should leaders balance AI automation with human judgment and accountability?
Yeah, I think first thing I would love leaders to do is stop using human in the loop as a comfort phrase.
Hmm.
It's important, but I find leaders gravitate too easily to it
Mm.
because ultimately anything you do around AI and machines or automation and accountability, they have to be designed properly
Mm.
because AI should handle work that is repetitive, information heavy, or coordination heavy, and human needs to stay involved where the decision is high risk or emotionally sensitive or ethically complex, or where the consequence of getting it wrong is significant, right? I look at, Mayo Clinic in the US, it's a good example of the mindset. They're exploring AI in care, but the serious work is around clinical oversight or validation or safety and governance. And in a pharmacy or patient support context, AI can summarize a case or flag missing information. But when a patient is distressed or a clinical issue is unclear or an exception could affect, their access to therapy, a human needs to own the judgment. And the goal is not to remove human judgment at the end of the day. The goal is to protect it for the moments that matter most.
Yeah, well said. What are the biggest mistakes organizations make when designing enterprise AI strategies?
The number one mistake I find is starting with technology instead of the business problem. Because a
Hmm.
lot of organizations will say, we need AI or we need to use AI. And we see this happening with a lot of boards.
Mm.
And then what they do is they buy tools or launch pilots and create committees, but they never answer the harder question. What part of the business are we actually trying to change?
Mm.
Because, Ashutosh, when I think about it, there's only a few different things that um, businesses really measure themselves against: revenue, cost, customer experience, employee experience, risk.
Right.
And when you think about that and you're actually trying to change one of those levers, it becomes much more straightforward in terms of what you're actually trying to change. So
Mm,
that's number one. The second mistake is spreading investments too thin. You
mm,
see this happening all the time where people talk about the number of use cases that they've done, 50 use cases, 100 use cases, and they sound impressive, but it usually means nothing if you don't have enough focus in the areas that matter.
mm,
And you see that in companies like, Amazon again or UPS. The value comes from connecting AI and analytics to real operational outcomes, routing, inventory, pricing, fulfillment, capacity, customer experience. Those are, big critical pieces of the puzzle. And then the last mistake I'll mention is ignoring the operating model.
mm,
As much as we like to talk about AI engineering and process engineering, ultimately how the company operates with the talent in the company is extremely important.
mm,
And AI does not scale if data is fragmented or approvals are slow or workflows are inconsistent because nobody owns the outcome. And my
mm,
blunt view is that most failed AI strategies do not fail because the model was bad. They fail because the organization never changed the work around it. And if they
mm.
never do that, you'll never see a transformation.
Well said. I often hear senior leaders say, "I'm not technical," and thereby I think in their own minds they justify that they can ask someone else to lead AI. But tell me, why could the phrase "I'm not technical" become a dangerous mindset for business leaders?
Yeah, and th this is a phrase that definitely bothers me quite a bit, especially in this day and age, because I'm not technical can quickly become an excuse to opt out of one
Correct.
of the most important leadership shifts of our time. And
Mm,
I'm not saying every business leader again needs to be, a software engineer, but leaders do need enough fluency to understand what AI can do, what it cannot do, where it creates risk, and how it changes the economics of a business.
mm,
To me, a leader saying, I'm not technical, it's like saying, I do not understand finance or I do not understand customers.
yeah.
Because at a certain level, that's just not acceptable. And the same is becoming very true of AI, because if an AI assistant is giving incorrect information to a customer, you cannot say the AI did it or my data scientist did it. The organization still owns the outcomes. And
Mm,
leaders who stay too far away will either block things they do not understand or approve things
mm,
they should have actually challenged. And I
mm,
think it's an onus on us as leaders to be able to be technically proficient enough to be able to be dangerous.
mm. Amazing. How important is data governance and compliance when you're building scalable AI platforms?
It's foundational. I know governance sounds boring, but in AI, it determines whether you can scale or not because AI depends on trusted data and clear permissions and
Mm,
privacy, auditability, and accountability, right? Coming back to the earlier question you had. And if those are weak, you either move slowly because nobody trusts the system, or you move so fast that it creates risk, and
mm,
neither is sustainable. And one of the best companies who have done this in a regulated environment is JP Morgan, because they treat data and AI as an enterprise level leadership issue and not just technology housekeeping. And I think about this quite a bit in healthcare or pharmacy, where the same principle applies because it's around, who owns the consent data, who owns the patient status data, which data can be trusted for automation, which data needs human review. So data governance and AI governance is no longer just about keeping records clean or just putting in controls. It's about knowing where can I actually trust this information to
mm.
make better decisions. Because if you cannot answer that and you do not have trust in it, you can't scale because no one is willing to adopt it.
Amazing. How will AI shape or reshape organizational structures and decision-making hierarchies?
I see this at Deloitte all the time, where AI is going to put pressure on the layers of the organization that
Mm,
mainly exist to move information around.
mm,
A lot of management structures around the globe were built because information was hard to gather, summarize, coordinate, and act on. And AI changes that because if a frontline team can get better insight or better recommendations or just better workflow support instantly, then some decisions can move closer to the work. And you
Mhm.
see this, in companies like Uber and Netflix, or, even a better example, there's a president of a data company that I was just speaking to who mentioned he had to always ask his folks for reports, and someone actually crunches that information. He eventually gets it. And now they've actually created a system where he can actually go into the system easily and get the insights.
Mhm.
So then it questions, well, what is the role of all the different individuals who are putting that information together for him? Because, he's operating with data and algorithms much closer to him. And this is happening the exact same way with the Ubers and the Netflix, because the data and the algorithms are much closer to the customer or the driver or the warehouse or the
Yeah.
or the viewer, right? So traditional companies often still move decisions up and down layers, and AI will eliminate like hierarchy over the years, and especially in regulated industries where it'll expose which layers create judgment and which layers simply forward information. So I think we're gonna see a flattening of the organizations happening in real time very, very quickly.
Hmm. So, you in the last few minutes, you've been talking a lot about how important it is for leaders to be able to understand and accept AI systems. My question, therefore, is how should leaders or how can leaders train themselves to make better decisions in partnership with AI systems?
Yeah, that's a great question. So leaders need to practice using AI as a thinking partner, not as a answering machine where they go to ChatGPT and just get the answer, right? The wrong way is to ask AI for the answer and just accept it. And the better way is to pressure test your thinking, show me the risks, give me the counter argument, find the pattern I'm missing, compare options, things like that, right? And if a retailer is deciding, where to open stores, for example, AI can help test, demographics or demand or competition and supply chain implications, right? Same thing with the hospital. If you're looking at wait times, AI can help identify bottlenecks in a current state process across referrals and scheduling, staffing and discharge, right? But the leader still has to apply judgment. And at Deloitte, like there was one session we had, it was a leadership session that we had over a full day. And it was fantastic because we ended up going into breakout sessions, but the way that we did it was we had the computer in front of us and we went into our AI tools. And while we were discussing different topics, people were researching, coming out of the insights, testing it with their peers. And it was one of the best conversations and completely changed the way that I was thinking about group AI machine collaboration.
Hmm.
So I think this is going to be very important in terms of how we work with the systems, because the future is not humans versus AI. And I know we hear a lot of that in the media.
Hmm.
To me, it's humans who know how to think with AI, and those are going to outperform humans who only know how to ask for answers from AI.
Hmm. Well said. But do you see AI making individual expertise and reputation more powerful than the institutional brands?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. I think yes, to a degree. AI lowers the cost of development or the cost of production,
Mm,
but it raises the value of trust.
mm,
So if everyone can produce content and analysis and code
mm,
and strategy or advice faster, the question becomes, whose judgment do I trust? And you see this
mm,
with AI slop in the social media content as well, or in news media, right? So very quickly, you tend to think, whose judgment do I trust? And you tend to go to credible sources, right? And the same thing is going to end up happening with physicians and researchers and investors who build strong reputations independent of their institutions.
mm,
So think about Andrew Ng in AI education, or physicians and scientists who have, built trusted public voices online, and
mhm,
AI is going to accelerate that. But institutional brands don't disappear because in regulated industries like banks or insurance, institutions still matter because they provide credibility and governance and scale and accountability. And Deloitte is just a great example of this, right? Where there's a trust that other organizations and individuals have. and they rely on us in terms of credibility and accountability and scale to be able
Mm,
to do things. So the shift is that institutions will need stronger expert voices inside them
mm,
because the brand alone will not be enough. The
mm.
people behind the brand will matter more at the end of the day.
Very interesting. I have time for two more questions for you, Shanil. Uh,
Sure.
as you look ahead, what, in your view, will distinguish AI native organizations from traditional companies?
Yeah, so a few years from now, it can happen very, very quickly, by the way. AI native organizations will feel very different, first of all.
Mm,
They will make decisions faster. They're going to redesign workflows more often. They're
mm,
going to measure value more clearly. They're just going to use data and AI just as part of everyday operations.
mm,
And we won't be talking about experiments or use cases or special projects because AI is just infused within the organization. It's just embedded into how work moves. And there's already companies like that. And Amazon, I mentioned, is just a great example of it, where everything from fulfillment or pricing and logistics are not separate pieces. They're just part of the operating model. And this is what
mm,
AI native will look like more and more in industries. When you look at financial services, a bank is not going to use AI just to summarize documents. It's going to redesign lending, for example. In a hospital, a clinician is not going to use AI to draft notes. It's going to redesign just patient access and emergency department flow, for example.
mm,
So that's how I see the divide going to happen. It's not going to be who has access to AI because it is ubiquitous in the end of the day. Everyone has access in some way. The divide will be around businesses who redesign with AI at the forefront and native
mhm.
versus the one who are still essentially testing it out.
Well said. And my last question for you, Shanil. If you could give one piece of advice to future leaders preparing for an AI first world, what would it be?
Yeah, so this goes back to the question you asked me around, I'm not technical and is that good enough?
Correct.
And so my advice to leaders would be do not become a spectator in this AI era.
Mm,
I think future leaders have to be more hands-on than leaders have been in a very long time.
mm,
I felt that myself. I'm more hands-on now than ever, whether it's
mm,
building agents, testing them, breaking them, using them in real work, whether it's AI brief agents that emails me updates or live client demos that I'm building end-to-end or workflow prototypes. Not because I'm trying to become a software engineer or technical or a coder, but because I need to understand what this technology can do, where it fails, and how it's fundamentally going to change the work. You're likely going to trust me much more
mm,
when I'm able to advise on AI when I've actually tested it. And you see that in other leaders as well,
mm,
whether it's Satya Nadella at Microsoft or Jensen Huang at NVIDIA. They're not treating AI like a side project. They're deeply engaged in how it changes products, work, infrastructure, and the economics of the business. So my advice is simple. Just get close to the tools, get close to the work, get close to the economics of AI. And in an AI first world, you do not need to be the best technologist in the room, but you cannot lead from a distance. And AI just cannot be someone else's job anymore and has to be the leader's job.
well said. And on that note, Shanil, I just want to say what a fascinating conversation this has been with you. Clearly, we are in a world where AI is here to stay. And I was just thinking as you were speaking, 40 years ago, when I started out in the corporate world, and computers were coming in, people would say, you need to know how to type well to be able to manage a computer.
Right.
Well before your time, I'm sure. But computers are here to stay, and AI will be absolutely part of every single aspect of our lives. I think you've given me, my viewers and listeners, some great pointers in how to think about and strategize about AI as life proceeds further. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ashutosh.
Thank you for listening to the brand called You Videocast and Podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.